Welcome into Shot and Vipp, a podcast brought to you by Inside Carolina this college football season. I'm Taylor Vippolis. He's Jeff Schottmer, Carolina letterman, breaking it down game by game. Shot, before we get started today, I have to remind everybody we've moved our website. We're all part of the new site, which is the same staff, the same standard, just a new home on the On3 network. You'll need to create a new account, a new subscription, but you could join now for just $1. Go to InsideCarolina.com to learn more. Shot, man, there is a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to Carolina football this week. But the place we wanted to both start as former Carolina or as Carolina football letterman, former players in the program, Mitch Mason and what Mitch Mason means to the program. Carolina honors him at the Clemson game, and they've also named part of the training facility in the weight room, the Mitch Mason Inspiration Deck. There was a really good article in the News and Observer by Shelby Swanson, just detailing Mitch Mason's battle, the fight that Mitch Mason's in right now, health wise, and he was pretty candid in it, where he mentioned he feels like he's very quickly running out of time, and his body is kind of just breaking down. What's kind of been your reaction and just the impact that Mitch Mason kind of has on the Carolina football program?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's heartbreaking. I would say no person associated with UNC football has been more impactful than Mitch. Mitch arrived in 2012, which was Coach Fedora's first year. I was a redshirt freshman on the team, and prior to him, I spent 1 year on the Everett Withers team in 2011, and we didn't have a team chaplain back then. So Coach Fedora gets hired in 2012 and hires Mitch from Clemson. And Mitch comes in, and we kind of didn't know what his role was, but he was each Saturday before the game, he was given pregame chapel and part of the pregame speech. But he had an office in the facility, and he was always around at practice, at lunches, at dinners, traveling with us. And he just began to build relationships with every player, every staff member, every trainer, every support staff member, anyone that walked through Keenan Football Center, Mitch Mason had a relationship with, or still has a relationship with. And, in the current times of constant change of college football, be it new players coming in and out each year, new coaches constantly changing, all that, Mitch has been the one mainstay with Carolina football. He's been one of the few paid employees that has lasted from 2012 until present. James Sperling's in the mix. Look what they did. They honored him with, a piece of that building, the James Sperling section of the Keenan Football Center. But Mitch Mason has had more of an impact than any player or coach that has been through that building since 2012. He is a constant. It doesn't matter if you are the best player on the team, or Marion Hampton, you're Drake Maye, you're Gio Bernard, you're Sam Howell, or you are the walk-on that will never see a snap. Mitch has one intention and one purpose, and that is to impact young people in a positive way. And he is the same person every day, whether he is feeling 100% or he is battling a life-threatening disease. And it's honestly the most impressive thing I've ever seen. I was on coaching staff when he first got the news of this rare disease that they found. And, he was still around the program every day. Every day you could see him, and we didn't really know what he was battling because he didn't really tell anybody. He never complained. And I honestly think if you did a poll of any person associated with UNC football from 2012 until today, every one of those players would tell you that Mitch Mason had a bigger impact than essentially any head coach they played for, any position coach they played for, or any coordinator. And I think the world needs to know. I think Carolina fans need to know how much he means to us as former players. I mean, I don't know about you. I still see him every time I go back to Chapel Hill. I still text him. That's coming from a guy that graduated, 10 years ago. And I know countless other guys that I played with and even that played after me feel the same way. So what they're doing and honoring him is it's well-deserved, and it's the least we can do, because he has been a bright light for Carolina football, even when it's been at its worst. So we're always praying for him. And, Tar Heel community should do the same. I know we rallied around him, and we've seen some heartbreak over the last few years on and off the field, whether it's the Tylee Kraft situation, but this is just as catastrophic. And obviously we're praying for the best, but he's one of a kind and, one of the best human beings that you'll ever come across.
Yeah, from a football perspective and just a life perspective on Mitch Mason's impact to the program, I believe it was in the News and Observer article that I read. From a football perspective, a lot of people don't understand that when players need an outlet to talk about how frustrated they are with whatever their role is on the team, Mitch Mason was kind of that point of contact before you start exploring other options, where it's like, hey, like, I think I should be getting, this many reps. This is what I'm getting. And Mitch was kind of the person who sits you down and is like, hey, this is why you're not playing. Or tries to tell you something that maybe you don't want to hear at the time. And I believe the example in the article was Switzer, where he was going through a tough time to start his freshman season. And Mitch Mason was the one who kind of told him, like, hey, your attitude kind of stinks right now. And you have all the talent in the world, but you have to put it together. And that's something where if Coach Brewer says that to Switz, it doesn't go over quite as well, because this is a guy that you're dealing with on an everyday basis. He's the guy who's making the decisions whether or not you're playing or not, and you sometimes do need that outside voice. And then even further, and more importantly than the football aspect, I think there's people that would not be here right now if it wasn't for Mitch Mason and Mitch Mason's impact on the team. You think of somebody like Jake Lawler, and Jake Lawler has been, super vocal on the mental health battles that he struggled with. And he's talked about, like, hey, Mitch Mason is one of the guys who,
literally talked him off a ledge.
Yes. So there's when you see stuff like the Tylee Kraft and when you see stuff like the Mitch Mason, it kind of puts the football in perspective. And just the impact they make is so beyond anything that can happen on a football field.
Absolutely. And I think we can drop the link for his GoFundMe. I think it's been up for a while, and I think all Tar Heels should look into donating to that. We don't know how much time we have left with Mitch, and he's been very candid about that. He feels like his time's running out, but he, God willing, he is going to impact lives for forever. The one story I'll say is he believed in me before I believed in myself, honestly. I remember training camp of my redshirt sophomore year. I essentially find out that I'm going to be starting. I played a little bit of special teams the year before, and, it's 2 weeks prior to South Carolina, and he comes up to me, during individual drills and kind of pulls me aside, after I take my reps. And he's like, "Shot, you don't know this, but you're ready." He said, "I've been watching you work for 2 years." He said, "You're one of the best linebackers in the ACC." And just like, whether he meant it or not, I just, for him to go out of his way and just like inject confidence in me, I'll never forget exactly where I was on Navy Field when he told me that. And I kind of got chills running through my body now, just, telling this story. But I think if you ask any former player, they have some type of experience with Mitch in that regard, of whether him injecting confidence in them on the field or helping them with a, family situation off the field, or, girl issues, or, kid problems, or whatever the case may be. I mean, he's all knowing in terms of how to speak to someone and help them get through whatever their battle is. And can't say enough good things about the guy.
Yeah. So for me personally, when it comes to Mitch, the moment that I can think of the most is after I graduate, in between trying to do media and trying to do coaching, and I'm basically volunteering, and it's me, I believe Mitch Mason, and I believe Chad Scott was at the table, and they were kind of just asking me how I'm doing. And I was like, dude, like the amount I'm getting right now, it's barely enough to get by comfortably. And I think like Coach Scott was more of like, yeah, I remember I went through that grind. Like it's a grind to get through that first couple of years. And then Mitch pulled me aside afterwards and was like, hey, if I go to FCA, the place that Mitch Mason worked for and placed him at North Carolina, and I tell them, hey, I have somebody who can make videos for me. Do you think one, you would have time to do those videos, and two, how much would you want me to tell them to charge for those videos so that we could find a way to get you even more money and put you in a spot that's even more comfortable? And like that's just the kind of guy he is, where it's like he's going to find any way possible to help you out and get you out of your struggle. Um, there, I'm glad we
It's a hard,
talked.
hard
I'm,
transition.
I'm glad we talked about that to start. Yeah, there's no easy way to transition into the topic of the day, I guess, when it comes to North Carolina football. So Sunday Night Football happens, and Drake Maye kind of has this coming out party where the Patriots beat the undefeated Bills in Buffalo and kind of establish to everybody that, like, hey, the Patriots should be taken serious. Drake is trending towards being a top 10 quarterback right now in the NFL after his past couple performances. And shot, man, everybody is talking about it last night on Twitter. The national media, the Mina Kimeses, the Dan Orlovskis, the ESPNs, everybody's talking about how great Drake Maye is. And then there was one account that was noticeably silent. Tommy Ashley from Inside Carolina was the first one to point it out, where he says, not a peep from Carolina football about Drake Maye's performance because it's the Patriots. Fast forward in the morning, you kind of maybe to the credit of the admin, maybe the admin was asleep. It was a late game. That game did finish late. But then you wake up in the morning, 7, 8 a.m., Carolina football still radio silent when it comes to Drake Maye and the Patriots. Reports come out that Bill Belichick has banned UNC from tweeting or reposting anything Patriots related. A meeting took place between the athletic department and football to discuss it around 9:30ish, and then less than an hour later, UNC football tweets out Drake Maye highlights. Thoughts on that entire situation?
If all that is accurate, it's an absolute clown show. I kind of bit my tongue earlier in the year when we talked about, the Patriots being banned from UNC facilities, scouts, and whatnot. I kind of bit my tongue in that regard, but this is not okay with me. The funny thing about it is Michael Lombardi probably has a say in this as well, and he comes from the social media background. He was a podcaster and social media guy for the last 10 years, so that's in today's world, that's how you get your information. That's how the younger generations, and now even the 30s, 40s, and 50s are consuming their information is via Twitter and Instagram and social media. And for us, and also to use it as a recruiting tool, for us to have a guy like Drake Maye and not be able to publish him to the world, and he should be all over every Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever we have out there. And if that's the pettiness we're stooping down to, then we got some issues. Because we're not putting a good product on the field and we're not displaying not arguably, UNC's best NFL player to the world and showing recruits and, our fan base how proud we are of him, and everyone should be recognizing, his accolades, et cetera. It's a clown show. College football is a production-based business on Saturdays, but the other 6 days of the week, it's about promoting your program. It's theater, essentially. How can you get the world to view your program in the best light? How can you paint your program in the best picture? And for us, one of the best ways is social media, and to show your former alums and former players are having success at the highest level against the former MVP. And if that's the level we're going to stoop down to, then I'm not on board with it.
Yeah, it feels like, and unfortunately for Drake Maye in this situation, he's the one that kind of got dragged to the middle of it.
And Drake doesn't care at all.
No,
No, he doesn't care one bit. But us as UNC fans, we got to support our guys, our heroes, our favorite players of all time. So that's going to light a fire under our ass. So
yeah,
I'm on board with that.
And when you look to when the Patriot post stopped, they do correlate to the same week that Bill Belichick was vocal about the Patriots not being welcomed in their building, because the Patriots beat the Panthers. They throttled the Panthers last week, and there was a touchdown, Drake Maye to Mac Hollins. So it's Tar Heel to Tar Heel, and they were, again, radio silent on publishing that. And you thought, okay, it was a bye week for Carolina. Maybe the social team.
They had to create the bye week hype video for sure.
Maybe the social team was off that week. And then the Sunday Night Football game happens, and still nothing from that. I don't like Drake being dragged into the middle of this, because it felt like at the time you're telling fans like, hey, there's two sides to this. It's the Patriots and it's Carolina, and you kind of have to choose one. And if you're Carolina and your two options are, hey, you have this one guy who was a homegrown kid from North Carolina, face of the team for his time at Carolina, now becoming a potential franchise quarterback. I don't even think it's a potential franchise quarterback. The Patriots are viewing him as their franchise quarterback. Or option B, the coach that just got here that has gotten destroyed in every game he's played against a Power 4 opponent. More people right now would rather watch Drake Maye play football than this North Carolina football team. I do respect a good grudge and a pettiness to an extent, but you can't be petty and then also be the team that's getting blown out by 4+ touchdowns every time you take the field against a team with a pulse.
I agree completely. It's funny that we're talking about this in a podcast, but you got to stay relevant with what's going on, and it's a big deal to Carolina fans, and I'm on board with it. I'm not a fan, and I'm glad that our administration stepped in. And look, the Maye family is one of the
they're the first family of Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Maye, his wife, both Carolina athletes, and then Luke hit one of the most iconic shots. I mean, yeah, that's a family. And again, that family doesn't care one bit about social media, nor do they care about the publicity. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say. It's if all that's true, clown show by our staff for not, for allowing that to happen, or for giving the social media team the direction, I guess, to not post about him or the Patriots. So
it's just an embarrassing look, on top of the product on the field being as bad as it's been. Does it feel safe at this point to assume the Hulu show is not coming out?
I haven't heard anything about it since August. I bet the cameramen have.
I think
put in their 2 weeks and they're no longer filming. I don't know.
So it seems like the crew is still out there doing things, and now I'm just wondering, where is that footage being stored? What's going to happen to it? Because you're looking at this North Carolina schedule, and there doesn't look to be too many more wins on the schedule for this North Carolina team. Cal's a lot better than I think people thought they would be, even though they get thrashed by Duke this past week. Virginia's a lot better than I think people thought they would be. And you're looking at this North Carolina team, and it's like, did you ever watch Sunderland Till I Die? It was a soccer It was a soccer show on Netflix. It was a really good soccer documentary. So it's about Sunderland, and they were an established club in the Premier League. They get relegated to the Championship, the second tier, and Netflix is like, we want to do a show about you guys coming back to the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole show is supposed to be this feel-good story about them making their way back to the Premier League. They get promoted back to the Premier League. They're so bad the season that Netflix is following them that not only do they not just stay in the championship, they get relegated to League One. And it's like a train wreck the entire time watching because everybody knows, like going in, like this was from last season. We know Sunderland gets relegated. And now you're seeing it play out live where people in their mind are realizing, the fans are realizing, oh my God, like this is actually going to happen. And it's like the managers from the team, they're packing their bags up. The players are like, we're not sticking around for this. That's what it feels like we're shaping up for this North Carolina Hulu show if it ever comes out, where it's like, how did it get that bad? Let's see the behind the scenes and let's see who's still there at the end of the season.
Yeah, if the season continues on the trend that it's currently on, I don't think there's any way it gets released. I'm sure Lombardi and Belichick have
Embargoed.
I'm sure they're executive producers on it and have final say of what gets put in the show and what doesn't. I think the only way it gets released is if they get fired. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think the Hulu releasing that is a good look. And I don't think I know people would want to watch it, to get some behind the scenes footage of what's going on. But because I'd like to see it, honestly.
Yes.
To figure out, because I can't put a finger to the pulse of what's going on.
Yeah.
I got some thoughts about everything, but I would love to see behind the scenes day to day of what's really transpiring to figure out why we are so bad.
Yeah. And it would be interesting to see the creative direction that they go on that show, because this isn't a case of where you're able to put lipstick on a pig if North Carolina just keeps losing by 24, 30 points every time. But the Clemson game shot, Carolina loses 38-10. The final score probably doesn't even do it justice for how non-competitive North Carolina was in that game. Felt like Dabo kind of took his foot off the gas maybe halfway through the second quarter when he realized, this North Carolina team has absolutely no shot. They could barely cross midfield. The defense looks like they're in quicksand trying to keep up with us. Clemson scores on a double pass on the game's first play from scrimmage. They're up 28-3 after one quarter. I saw a video from Bryn on WRAL where he was talking about the game, and the notes he wrote down was outcoached, outplayed, no physicality, lack of motivation from coaches and players. So that was Bryn's take. What was your take?
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I mean, coming off a bye week, you'd expect us, to be able to scheme up some offense, scheme up some defense, maybe scheme up a trick on special teams to keep the game relevant, not have a 4-touchdown blowout in the first half. But the thing that really stood out to me were a couple things. All right, obviously you have the double pass for 75 yards on the first play of the game. That is a coverage breakdown. Okay. Interesting enough, we moved Dixon into the slot for this game. He was mostly playing, the nickel position. So he's put in a different position on the first play of the game. Normally he's the one forcing the play because he's, playing corner, but here he's playing nickel and it looks like he's in a deep half and he completely bites. And, his first play at nickel, huge MA to cost us 75 yards and a touchdown. Here's what I didn't like next. So we actually sustain a decent drive on our first drive. We get down into the Clemson red zone, and I think we're just coaching so passively. We have 4 on Clemson's 17 or 18. We're down 7. First of all, our offense hasn't been able to score touchdowns all year. So we get down in the red zone, first possession, move the ball, and what do? We kick a field goal.
Yep.
You're playing Clemson at home. You've been very underwhelming the past few games. Have a play on 4th and 1 to get 1 yard. In my opinion, a football team on the first drive, if they're inside the opponent's 20 and it's 4th or less than 3 or less, go for it. What do you have to lose?
Yeah,
3 points. That's not going to do anything versus Clemson. Granted, their offense hasn't been as successful, but be aggressive.
Yeah, and Carolina rushed for 9 yards on that first down. So you get to a 2nd and 1 situation, and your 2nd-and-1 play is a fade attempt to Jordan Shipp in the end zone, and then your third down is another pass attempt to Max Johnson, where it felt like North Carolina, that first drive, the run game was working, and then the second you get in a situation where it's 2nd and short, 3rd and short, you turn to your backup quarterback, who most Carolina fans know that this backup quarterback's not going to win you too many games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we weren't playing to, or we weren't coaching to win the game. We were just, happy to be out there. The ironic thing about this is because Clemson goes up 14-3. They have a 4th down and 3 at midfield. What do? They go for it on 4th and 3, get the first down, and then the very next play they score a touchdown. That is coaching aggressively, playing aggressively. Then they go up 21-3. So they, took advantage of their 4th downs and were aggressive, while us on the other end were, content with kicking a field goal in the red zone when we have 4th and 1. That's one of the most frustrating things that I saw watching the game. I just watched the first half. I'll be honest. I didn't watch the second half. Don't want to talk about it. But in the first half, there were coverage busts, missed tackles, bad tracking angles, and more coverage busts. And I think our DC put us in a bad situation on a couple of them. One, we had a cover 0 pressure right after Clemson got a first down, right as they crossed midfield, and they threw as a defensive play caller, from an offensive perspective, every offensive coordinator in America calls a shot play the play after they get a first down after they cross the 50. That is the most common rule in college football. Watch any game. As soon as the offense crosses the 50 and they have a first down, they're going to take a shot to the end zone because, look, they're in plus territory. They have a free play, essentially. The defense isn't expecting it always. So we call a cover 0 blitz, and they score a touchdown. Here's the thing about Clemson. Their offense is not – it's very vanilla in terms of, they line up in 11 personnel most of the game. It's very generic formations, 2x2, 3x1, tight end on the ball, tight end off the ball. It's not a bunch of eye candy. It's not a bunch of shifts and motions like you see from Georgia Tech or some of these complex offenses. It's your base. When you install a defense, you install 2x2, 3x1 with normal splits. That's what Clemson is the majority of the game. So essentially, if we roll out our training camp base coverages, you should not have any coverage bust because you practice against that look a million times. What really hurts a defense and makes them think and communicate is when you constrict the formations, when you put them in bunches and stacks and motions and unbalanced. Clemson doesn't do any of that. So for us to have that many coverage busts over basic formations is just mind-blowing to me. They run a wheel route to go up 28-3. When they're in the red zone, our flat player is just sitting there watching the quarterback. The running back runs right by him. Miscommunication between the boundary safety and the linebacker. No one touches him. No one's within 15 yards of him. I mean, it's seriously day one install of defensive football against the day one install offense, and we can't stop it. So you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. And, we've hired a bunch of first-time coaches on staff. Whether they aren't getting the job done, they can't. Look, they can only know so much. If they know everything, but the players that they're playing in the game can't execute it, then that's on the coaching. Obviously, the players have to execute, but there's a complete disconnect between our coaching staff competence, which I thought I would never say going into the season, and our lack of talent and lack of effort, lack of execution on defense. It is just there's holes on every level of the team.
Quick break so I can remind everybody about our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt. If you're going to be in Chapel Hill, you could visit them on Franklin Street. And if not, no worries. You could go online to johnnytshirt.com. They have everything the Carolina fan could possibly want: the hats, the T-shirts, the jerseys, you name it. They've got it. I'm on their website right now, and the front page has been taken over by Carolina basketball. For first week of of October. So you could shop their newest arrivals and get all your gear for this Carolina basketball season. Should be a fun one with the class that Hubert Davis brought in. Shot. Oh, and don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers save 10% off their orders. Shot. I was so eager to talk about this North Carolina team. I almost forgot to mention how great the people over at Johnny T-shirt are, and how
Can't
great
forget about them.
how great their customer service is, and how they're always taking care of the Inside Carolina community. Shot, but I don't think realistically, I don't think people expected Carolina to win this game against Clemson, even though Clemson came into this game struggling. Clemson, was in a tight game against Troy. Clemson loses to LSU. Clemson loses to Georgia Tech. What people have seen from this North Carolina team, I don't think many people would have predicted anything but a Clemson win. But the problem I think we're seeing is every team is looking at this North Carolina team right now and it's like, hey, anything that we have to fix, North Carolina is going to be our get right game. Let's circle this game, and we're able to work out any of our kinks against this North Carolina team. Because Clemson, the final score 38-10. If Clemson wanted to score 70 plus points, Clemson could have scored 70 plus points. That was a name your score type of game for North Carolina, but it's just like inexcusable how bad this team is. And you're looking at the second half. You mentioned not wanting to watch the second half. The ESPN broadcast was highlighting in the second quarter all the fans that were leaving Kenan Stadium. And if we're being honest, I don't blame a single fan who left. The product on the field has been, pretty close to garbage for what they're putting out. I think when you look at the beginning of the season to where we're at now, the fans did their part, the boosters did their part, the administration did their part committing to the big time football and trying to build this big time football atmosphere. This just comes down to a failure of the coaching staff. This comes down to a failure of assessing your roster. This comes down to a failure of roster construction, and then it comes down to a failure of coaching the guys up and putting out a respectable product on the field. So we're sitting here after 5 games. I guess, what's your level of shock for? I think we both had an idea of what the floor and the ceiling could possibly be for this team. But what's your level of shock that it feels like whatever we thought the floor was for this team, it's like 10 stories below ground where the actual floor is?
Yeah, my shock level is at 10 in terms of I knew we would be talent deficient compared to some teams going into the season. I didn't think we would be at a coaching disadvantage as well. Hand up. I'll admit that I am wrong to this point so far. All off season, we're doing the podcast and preseason, and I'm beating my fist on the table saying, how good of a schematics coach Bill Belichick is, how good of a talent evaluator he is, how good of an in-game coach he is. All the things that need to transpire to have a successful head coach. I thought he was great at all of them, and after watching these couple games, I feel like we're at a coaching disadvantage going into the games now. I look at UCLA versus Penn State. UCLA is a 25-point underdog. They look like the worst team in college football, and they go beat Penn State. You know why they beat Penn State?
Why is that?
They coached aggressively. They went for it on 4th downs. They had an onside kick. These are multiple reasons, but we aren't doing anything from a coaching staff to change the game in that regard. Like, when have we ever schemed up a trick play or a series of plays where we are, consistently hitting at a high clip and moving the ball effectively down the field, or defensively hanging our hat on, one type of defensive rotation where we're a defensive play call where we're very successful and we know what we're doing and we're stopping them at a high clip. I think it's a lot on the coaches to, it is I want to, call out their lack of ability to put us in a situation to be successful. Um, you know, it's just I don't even have the words to say it
Yeah.
right now. I
Yeah.
really don't. I thought going into the season that every game we would go into, our coaching staff, led by Bill, would inject fear into the opponent because we would, you know, out scheme them defensively, out scheme them special teams wise. And then even with our lack of talent at multiple positions, we would find a way to overcompensate for that. And it just hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
And at this point, obviously, I'll go back. Bill Belichick's been our head coach for 10 months. Here are the facts. There have been some very positive moments in his tenure. And that starts with, the offseason hype, the speaking engagements he did all offseason, us, being a relevant team in the offseason on ESPN and in the public and on social media, things like that. His engagement on campus with our sports facilities and programs, that's all been great. But like I said, this is a production business. And for us to lose three of our Power Four opponent games on average 40-11, that is not what I expected us to lose some games, but I expected us to make them ugly and
Be competitive.
be competitive. And, we talked about what's going to be a successful season of us getting better as the season goes on. And through 3 Power Four games, we haven't gotten better.
No.
We've essentially gotten worse, in my opinion. We've been downhill from TCU. UCF was worse than TCU, honestly, and then Clemson was worse than UCF. So, unless we truly got to hit rock bottom before we climb up a little bit, maybe this is rock bottom. But I'm very, I'm not all the way out. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think they should be fired. The thing that I guess that I'm confident about is Bill does seem to have the mindset to want to fix this. He, in my opinion, just watching his press conferences, watching him, I don't think that he's just going to bail on the end of the year. I think he wants to see this through at least another year to try to correct his wrongs and see if he can move on from there, which I don't think it's the right move to move on from him after a year. I really don't.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I think if you're Carolina, the right move would be to give him another year. Just because historically, Carolina really hasn't been a school that could dish out $25+ million for a buyout. Then you're looking at your next head coach. You have to identify your next head coach. That's another, $5-10 million that you have to allocate for that budget. You have to hire the staff, and then you also have to handle. Last season, North Carolina was the best job in the window, without question. North Carolina was the top job. Now you're looking at, does the Florida job open if Billy Napier gets fired? Does Hugh Freeze get fired at Auburn? Does that job open? There's almost there's like a 10% chance that if every job that people thought was going to open up, that Carolina is going to be the best job. When last year it felt like Carolina would have had their pick of the best candidates, the John Summeralls, the Matt Campbells from Iowa State, where if they did conduct the serious coaching search that Bubba Cunningham wanted to do before being undercut by a member of the board of trustees, who knows where North Carolina would have ended up. So I don't think it would be smart for Carolina to move on from that perspective. Now, that's also knowing that there's more games where this could get worse. This fully understanding that this could get worse. I think if you're Carolina, the best case scenario might be you don't have to get rid of Belichick, but Belichick after this year is like, you know what? We finished 2-10. We finished 3-9. Like, college, not all what it's cracked out to be. Here's North Carolina. Here's $1 million. I'm going to buy out myself from this contract, and then we kind of all go our separate ways. But when you're talking about getting a full 3 years, $30 million guaranteed, and a lot of the times these coaches have egos to think that they can fix things. It's hard to see Bill Belichick giving up on this after just a year. But yeah, North Carolina has played three Power Four opponents this season. They've lost by 34, 25, 28. Carolina's offense is 121st on Pro Football Focus. That's only out of, I think there's now 136 teams in the FBS level. And then North Carolina's offense against those Power Four opponents is averaging 11 points per game. It's the lowest among Power Four schools. It's the second lowest among all teams that have played at least three Power Four opponents. The only one being lower is Kent State. And Kent State is basically the sacrificial lamb going to the schools like Oklahoma to collect a check and get their teeth kicked in. They're the only team averaging less against Power Four opponents. They're averaging 8 points a game. North Carolina at 11 points per game in their games against Power Four opponents. So, yeah, there's really not much to talk about this team other than that they've been really bad. And I think what you're seeing from this North Carolina staff is Michael Lombardi sends out a letter to boosters telling them, hey, kind of trust the process. Says he doesn't really want to blame the past coaching staffs, but in doing so, kind of mentions how empty the roster was and how void for talent the roster was. But then they're doing the whole trust the process, but they came in saying that they want to be the 33rd NFL team in Chapel Hill. Shot, I'm not even sure
Contradictory.
I'm not. There's 17 teams in the ACC for football. I'm not even sure Carolina is not the 17th team in the ACC.
It's us and Stanford.
Yes, that game might be. There should be a trophy for that game, and it's like the bottom of the barrel trophy.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't read the letter that Michael Lombardi released, but I heard a couple things about it. And the interesting thing to me is, Bill Belichick, widely known for coining the phrase, do your job. And the funny thing is the administration at UNC, the board of trustees, they finally did their job in terms of opening up the checkbooks, opening up their pocketbooks, injecting money into our program, hiring a coach and paying him $10 million and giving him the resources to spend X amount on his staff, and, opening up the quad for tailgating and changing stuff off the field, to essentially give our new head coach the keys to the castle. They did their job. They finally did. It's been a long time coming, and they finally did it. And we trusted this man to, steer our program in the right direction, and he hasn't done it. So it's time for the coaching staff and the sports staff to do their job and right the ship. Again, I'm not calling for the firing of him. I don't think it's in the best interest of anybody. I do think after the season, there needs to be coaching changes on staff. I think we can't go into obviously we're jumping ahead to 2026. We can't go into the offseason and have any type of momentum with the same 10 or 11 full-time coaches on our staff. There's just no possible way. And obviously there's going to be another roster rehaul, I think. I can see another 40, 50 guys transferring in and out. So something's got to be fixed. I don't know if we can get it done. Since I was very let's say hype about this hire, preseason and, all off season, I'm going to stick to my guns and say, look, if someone can turn around, then, I'm going to give him a chance to do it. But as of right now, if I were to rate from the first quarter of TCU up until today, I think his tenure at UNC has been a catastrophic failure over these last couple weeks. From the date of hire until TCU game, I'd give it a B+, A-, just because, they came in, they said the right things in the offseason. I thought they were doing good things for our program. But again, again, production business, and it's been a catastrophic failure from TCU until now. So can we turn it into a D- by the end of the year or a C+? Not realistic.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my thought on everything.
Yeah, I would give it a B-. From time of hire to the first TCU game. The hype was off the charts. Little too much people digging into the program and still having things come out where it's like, ooh, that's not really a good look. A lot of Pablo Torre reporting was winning the offseason against Belichick, and then you're like, okay, once the games start, maybe some of that will go away. And now it's like, if you're a Carolina fan, you might be hoping for Pablo to find out more, because you're in your mind, you're like, there was no way that this should have been this bad this fast for this North Carolina team, where we're into the first week of October. It doesn't feel like this team is going to be playing any meaningful games. It doesn't feel like this team is going to be able to stay within, single digits against any Power 4 team on their schedule. It feels like Duke, it feels like NC State are playing a different sport when you're watching this North Carolina team. But I guess if you're doing glass half full, Carolina goes into another bye week before their Friday night game against Cal. So theoretically, Carolina has more time to figure it out, or they're going to have more time for people to kind of evaluate their situations and realize, hey, we looked like we were in quicksand against Clemson. We might be in quicksand now in this program. And from all accounts, things behind the scenes, they don't seem good either.
What do you think the spread will be
against Cal? At Cal?
Yeah.
So Cal, I think Cal, you have to make them at least a touchdown favorite, because I'm gonna look up there. The home field is at least 3, and then I would assume people would assume that if North Carolina played Cal on a neutral field, they'd be at least a 3-4 point favorite. So that's why I would lean towards opening this at -7. And then if you're Vegas or you're these sports books, I think you just have to live with that. A majority of people are going to be betting on Cal because this North Carolina team doesn't really look competitive. I'm just worried that Gio Lopez, Max Johnson, Tom Brady's not walking through that door. Tom Brady's not walking through that door to kind of save this coaching staff and bail this coaching staff out. And the quarterback that Cal has, he's gone through a couple of struggles of games against San Diego State when Cal got shut out, and they were up against Duke and then just spiraled out of control, and that game wound up being a blowout. But Cade Klubnik almost played himself back into Heisman conversation, Shot.
That happens a lot over the years when you play UNC. Hey, I'll say this. I played Clemson 2 times, and in the 2 games we lost, we lost, I think, by 2 or 3 touchdowns combined in the 2 games. So, you lose by 5 touchdowns. It's not very good. So
the 2015 one was an all-time matchup with the onside kick. The 2014 one, the only thing I remember from that, I was shocked to just look up the score and see that it was a 15-point game, because the only thing I remember is the secondary just looking lost. And it felt like Clemson was just like, hey, 4 verts every time. One of these back 4 guys is going to mess up their assignment, and Deshaun Watson's gonna air it out. I just looked up Deshaun Watson.
It looked very,
stats.
very similar to the first play of the game on Saturday. That's what it looked like.
Deshaun Watson finished 27 of 36 for 435 yards, 6 touchdowns.
Nice.
And 1 interception. But other than that, it was.
So I have a lot of room to stand on by doing this podcast, right? I played on a defense that gave up 40-something to Clemson too. So, At least my offense could score.
Yeah, that's
At least we competed.
yeah.
At least we
And
looked like we were, trying hard.
there's something to be said about a defense that knows their offense is going to put up points. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to bring your A game every time. Like there's a lot of times when you were playing with the Larry Fedora offense where it's like, hey, if the defense just comes with a C performance right now, the skill guys on offense, they're going to find ways to win. And that whole 2014 season felt like it started to get away at the end and finished with that Rutgers quick lane bowl.
We don't need to go down this rabbit hole here.
Yeah. But you need to talk about the lows before you could talk about the highs. And that 2014 team, we had the lows, and then we kind of had that, like, the lows continued into the next season after the South Carolina game. And then there was that kind of like come to Jesus moment, like, hey, forget what these coaches are saying right now. Like the people in this room, we're good enough to put together a winning season.
Here's what I'll say about the lows, though. I mean, we had a very, very low point of that season, 2014, but we were also 6-6. We were competing against and beating Power 5 opponents. So
there's something to be said when your low is still going to a bowl game.
Yeah, exactly.
Where
I'd take that this year in a heartbeat.
If there were odds on FanDuel right now, odds to make a bowl, this Carolina team, yes, is probably like plus 3,000.
Plus 10,000.
Maybe a little flyer on it?
No. I'm not putting $10 on it.
We will be back after the game against Cal to break that game down in its totality. Appreciate everybody watching and listening, and Shotman, appreciate the time as always.